If you're feeling like a failure, you're not alone. And you've come to the right place. Keep watching to understand why you feel this way and how to move out of self-loathing so you can try again. And at the end, I'll talk about a time when I felt most like a failure and what I did to move through it. So feeling like a failure comes from believing that your value is attached to what you can produce. If you want to change how you feel, you've got to become as good at accepting your positive attributes as you are at accepting your negative attributes. So, how do we do this? The first thing, identify your internal dialogue. When you're feeling like a failure, what are you saying to yourself? What is your tone? Are you gaslighting yourself and only looking at your bad to stimulate a reaction? Often we berate ourselves to whip ourselves into shape to meet some sort of self-proclaimed idea of what we should be or how we should be. This is a very, very common thing for many of us. We have been taught to berate ourselves into performance. It is not effective, and it is in fact detrimental to our mental health. What is your internal dialogue like? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments below and how you try to speak positively to yourself if you do. The second thing, positive affirmations. I fucking hate these. I do. I actually don't anymore, but I used to. It was so hard for me to look in my eyes in a mirror and speak kind words to myself. It actually made the hackles on the back of my neck stand up to do it. But the truth is, as you offer yourself support and accept the compliments that you are directing to yourself without deflecting, man alive, it changes your internal perspective. It is so important if we feel unworthy that we speak kindly and positively towards ourselves. It is something we have to train. And so that leads me to the third point. Our minds are malleable and they are open to developing new pathways of thought when we train them properly. However, it takes time to develop. Hence, positive affirmations, recognizing how you speak to yourself, learning to retrain that flow of thought is absolutely crucial for us to get to a place where we can change the internal narrative that our minds have been trained to do. It's a default path. I often think of it as like a pile of sand. You know, when you build a big pile at the ocean, if you're at the beach, then you dump a bucket of water on that and you see the river run down. And if you keep dumping that bucket, eventually there will be a deep rivulet that the water just flows through. And if you want to change that path, you have to put in barriers to change the flow of the water. And if you pour that water too quickly and you've built a barrier, the barrier will break down and it will revert to the old way of the old habit or the deep ravine that has been built by the running of that water. It takes time. You have to be careful with it. You have to work at it. But I promise you, if you persist, your mind will change and you will no longer be berating yourself nonstop. You will think of yourself in a holistic manner, knowing the good and the bad. At the end of this video, I'm going to tell you about a song I wrote about my struggles with this very issue. So stick around to the end. The fourth thing that you want to do is get help from a trained therapist if you're really struggling. Signs that this may be the case are you're no longer interested in things you love to do, you're having trouble completing any of your tasks, you're retreating from social situations with people that you love, and you're having suicidal thoughts. If there's any sort of thought of ending your life, even if it's passing, this is something to worry about. People used to ask me, are you suicidal? And I always say, no, I'm not, because I didn't have a concrete plan to kill myself. That is the end of suicidal thoughts when you're making the plan. But if you're having passing thoughts running through your brain like of killing yourself because you feel like you want to get away, you're struggling with negative thoughts and you need to watch this and take care. And since you're still watching, do me a favor, subscribe. I've got lots of videos on these things that will help you overcome struggles in your life that I have been able to do with the help of many people who have supported me. I've struggled with this issue my whole life, and I have to constantly monitor it because I tend to focus on my worst attributes over my best. It is a way that I've trained my brain, and I have worked on it, and I'm getting much better. And in general, I do well. But when things hit me, when stuff gets really tough, I have to be very, very careful not to slip into that old trend, like that bucket of water that I pour in the sand if it comes too hard, I will revert to the old ways of berating myself, thinking poorly of myself, and having bad thoughts. So I watch it carefully, and then I have things that I do in order to keep myself from falling too deep and getting the help before things get to a point where I'm thinking of killing myself. The reason I struggle with this is because I had severe child abuse as a kid from the age of 4 to 8. It's not uncommon. A lot of us face different trials. It may not be child abuse for you. You may have other traumas in your life that have caused you to really doubt the validity of who you are, the value of who you are. And when that happens, it can be overwhelming. In the year 2000, I was at a point in my life where I had actually made a plan to kill myself. I knew exactly where I was going to do it. I knew exactly how I was going to do it, and I knew exactly when. And in that moment of struggle, as I thought about it, I thought, I got to give myself one last chance. And in the process of that, I wrote a song. The chorus goes, "When you say your prayers, do they reach the sky, or do they just sink to the ground? When you're lying in bed, do you dream about life? Does dreaming about life just bring you down?" And that's where I was at. There's also a lyric, I wrote it at the age of 30, and I said at that time, "When you were young, you set big goals and they sounded great. Now you're old, and with none of them done, it's a bit too late." And in the space I'm in, healthy, I can look at that and laugh at the ridiculous nature of that thought. Because at 30, I was so young, and I had so much ahead of me. And I believed I had nothing left. I had no hope. I had no way of seeing a path forward that was good for me. I just thought, I need to end this. It'd be better for everyone, including myself. The pain and the noise in my head was so much. It was overwhelming. And I wrote this song. And then in the year 2020, it was Christmas time. I had gone through a divorce. My children weren't seeing me. That's kind of a common thing for men that happens in the course of a divorce. And I was in the hospital with diverticulosis. It's an inflammation of the intestines that was extremely painful on Christmas Eve. By myself, knowing because of COVID, only family could visit, and I had no family that was going to visit. I knew I was going to be alone. And I was sad, I have to admit. It wasn't ideal for me, but I was not depressed. I was not thinking about killing myself. I was not in that space where I was demeaning myself for what was going on. And every year at Christmas time, because that was the time of the year that I was thinking of killing myself, I reflect on this song that I wrote in the year 2000. And I thought, wow, what an incongruity of thought. Here I am in a space now that everyone would look at and say, oh my gosh, he's gone through a divorce, his kids won't see him, it's Christmas, he's by himself. How horrible, right? That is the picture that it paints. And yeah, it's sad, it's not fun. However, I was not suicidal. And if you had looked at my life in the year 2000, I was married, I had lots of people around me that loved me, and I was ready to kill myself. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. The difference that time can make when you reach out and get help and follow these things that I had done. And I actually sang the song and posted it on Facebook, and I said, if any of you at this time of year are struggling like I used to, reach out and get help. And it was really kind of a beautiful moment because my cousin actually wrote me later and said, hey, my friend heard this post and reached out and told me that she was getting ready to commit suicide, and it saved her life. And that is a beautiful thing, right? To think from my pain that I went through to writing this song to 20 some years later, or maybe 30 years later, 20 years later, that's right. Wow, I was able to save somebody's life because I had written a song in my pain. And the song is what kind of turned things around for me by being able to touch that emotion that I felt and release it. So, if you are somebody facing this kind of thing, I hope that you can do the same thing as I did and reach out for help. I got a therapist who helped me. I went through this process of learning and helping change my mind and restore my mind to what it should be, which is a balance of good and bad and standing your sacred ground. Brene Brown says, don't shrink, don't puff up, stand your sacred ground. Your sacred ground accepting the whole of yourself with all the love that you have, knowing that you're of worth and of value regardless of who you are. If you like that, stick around. I got another video coming up called Turning Fear into Power. I'm James Burnham. Thanks for joining me.